Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a tomato review on this tomato right here, and this is called the Beba Micro Dwarf, and I'm referring to these as Nano Dwarf varieties. There's a very few specific varieties that I'm referring to them as, and there's not many of them out there, but I refer to them as Nano rather than Micro. And the reason for that is that these plants in general are so small that they really fall outside of the class of what I would refer to as a Micro Dwarf. I mean, these things are absolutely tiny. These plants don't get, I mean, at a best case scenario, probably 3 inches. And in normal conditions, probably around 2. These plants, they are unbelievably small, and they don't get any bigger than that. In fact, the only tomato that I know that was originally like that was the Micro Tom, which you can't get varieties for that anymore. You can buy Micro Tom, but it's not really a Micro Tom tomato. They just used the name, and they just picked some other red tomato and named it Micro Tom. That's not what a Micro Tom is. Micro Toms were very, very tiny plants, just like this. Actually, what I would refer to as Nano Dwarfs, or world's smallest varieties. And that's basically what this is. I've only got a couple of them. I do have seed coming to me, hopefully, for the original Micro Tom, the original version, which is what I'm referring to as a Nano Dwarf, or Ultra Dwarf, or Super Dwarf. I like the word nano, and I'm just using this for terminology on my website, so when people come to my website, they know that there's a difference between this variety of tomato and the regular Micro Dwarfs, because these are so tiny. If you try to grow these in an arrangement with regular Micro Dwarfs, the Micro Dwarfs will actually outdwarf this thing, and this plant won't get any light and it'll die. So you need to plant these by themselves, and I make sure that I make that clear by putting an interesting name next to it as Nano Dwarf rather than Micro Dwarf. So, in my opinion, that should actually be a class of its own, because these plants are nothing like the Micro Dwarfs. They're very, very different as far as the size and everything else. I'll try to include some images in here too for you, so you can see how small they are. So anyway, here's the tomatoes. All right, so they're generally almost teardropped a little bit. They got a little bit of a point generally on the bottom of them. Each plant only puts out maybe about 5, maybe 6 tomatoes that I was getting, and they're pretty small. This is what I got off of basically 4 plants. I think I got almost one of these before. This is a second one, and I got one more that's going to be almost as many here. So figure this times 3 roughly is what you'll get out of 4 plants. So it's not bad, but there's really not many seeds inside of this. So let's cut it open. I'm not going to weigh them because they're so small that it's absolutely ridiculous. Take this one here. These are bichambers, so that is definitely a true cherry. Okay, you can see that. And you can see there's really not many seeds on the inside of it. We'll do a Brix on it. Let's break out the Brix meter. Oh yeah, there's some juice in there. It's about a 4.5, almost 5. Kind of like between 4.5 and 5, so it's close. It's not quite 5. It's a little on the low side, which is not a big deal. I've already eaten some of these, and they were pretty good. It could just be that one's, because the plants are getting ready to die. Basically, they're done. They're pretty much, they hit their 90 days, and then after that, they're all fruited. They just basically die, and that's what determinate tomatoes do. And I'm pretty sure that's what this is. So let's do a taste test on that and see what it tastes like. Okay, so let's get right into the numbers. The sweetness, well, I wasn't that impressed with the sweetness. It was a little bit on the low side for me, though I've had a few of these earlier, in the week, and they taste a little better than what they're tasting now. It could just be that they're dying off. Their plants are starting to yellow, and they're determinates. They're done. So it could just be that they're dying off, and maybe the flavor is just, I don't know, maybe the starches aren't converting over quite as much or something. I'm not sure. But they weren't quite as sweet, so I wasn't impressed. So I'm going to put that number at about a 23.5. You can probably say 24. It's almost average, but it's a little lower than average. The tangy part was about normal. That was about a 28, 29 at a tangy, so it was pretty good tangy-wise. It was just the sweetness wasn't there to help balance that flavor out. So it was more tangy than sweet. Now, the tomato flavor, which is the prominence of that flavor, it was about average, maybe slightly lower, somewhere around a 5, I would say. Probably go average with that. Nothing high, nothing extraordinary. Nothing special about it. Just your average strength and tomato flavor. So we'll leave it at that. As far as moisture goes, probably put that at about a 6, 6.5. Generally, with moisture, you want to be around a 6, 6.5 on this, and that's a right amount of moisture. You want to be a little above average on that. So the moisture part of this was fine. Tardiness, there may have been a very slight bit of tardiness, but again, that tardiness could be a result of the end of the year and the plants are dying. So there was a little bit of tangy and tardiness there. Not tanginess, but like tingly type of tardiness here. Very little, less than 1. So there wasn't very much, but there was a little something there. I didn't get any undertones to it. Texture was about average on that. Nothing special with the texture. Again, the skins on these tomatoes, or the flesh on these tomatoes rather, are very thin, and it's very hard for me to. It's like eating almost a currant tomato. It's just like almost nothing there. So texture, I'm just going to put at average for that because most Micro Dwarf tomatoes are actually like that. Production was okay, I guess, for plants that only get to about 2.5 inches tall. I guess that's pretty good. So I would probably even go a little higher than good. I'd probably say production was probably around a 6. But since the plant, I mean, it's so tiny. I mean, I can't even see how this thing can. The whole plant that I watched this whole thing grow. The whole plant consisted of 1 or 2 leaves, and it consisted of about 3 bracts with all tomatoes on it and 1 stem down the middle. So it would picture 1 stem came up the middle, then a bract, and a bract, and they had tomatoes on it. Not like a bract with tomatoes on each side. It was more almost like multiflora. So they came out like that. They branched off and made a whole bunch of and there was no leaves on it. It was just stem and tomatoes. I've never seen anything like this. So it's really bizarre in and of itself. So I mean, so when I talk about production for a tomato like that, I guess Nano Dwarf, if you want to use that term, yeah, I would say that's actually pretty good now that I think about it. There was nothing there. It was just sticks. So I guess I'm going to bring that production level actually up a little bit. Let's say 7 for that production because that was actually pretty good for a 2.5 inch tall plant. Now, as far as skins go, they were a little bit tough. They weren't that bad, but I'm going to definitely go with toughness. Now, again, when we're scaling skins, the higher the number goes, the better and smoother it is. In other words, the skins break up, they don't get stuck in your teeth or anything. And the lower the number is, it's just a really bad skin experience. They're sticking to the roof of your mouth. You actually got to peel them off with your fingernails to get it out of behind your gums. Sometimes they stick against your gums. You can't get them off. You end up trying to get them out, and you end up scratching your gums trying to get the skin off your gums because it literally plasters itself to whatever surface it is. It's like a type of cellophane almost. So yeah, when you get an experience like that, I usually rate them really low. But this skin, I'm going to put probably at about a 4.5. It was a little lower than average. The skins did get in the way a little bit, and they broke up though because I was eating these, regular wise, just whole, not cutting them up, and they were breaking up pretty good with the tomatoes. It's just when they get a little on overripe side, those skins you're going to have problems with those skins. You will be spitting them out. So yeah, just a little bit lower than average. I almost want to call it average, but as far as seeds go, it's, I guess for something like this, I mean, there's not a lot of seeds in them. It's almost, like maybe a dozen seeds per tomato, so it is really low. But again, we're talking about a Nano Dwarf here. We're talking about something that's ridiculously small. So I'm going to go about average, being that this particular tomato variety is very unique to itself, but it's generally not a heavy seed producer. You don't get a lot of seeds out of this tomato variety. Not very much at all. Out of all the tomatoes that I've seen, like you've seen earlier, out of all of that, how many seeds did I probably get out of that combined? If you were to add up the full harvest, not very much, guys. Maybe 100 seeds, maybe. If I'm lucky, I don't even think I got that much out of it. It's ridiculously low, so it doesn't produce a lot of seeds. So I almost want to go average for the Nano Dwarfs, But I might even go a little lower on the seeds because it just simply didn't produce a lot of seeds. Again, the higher the number is with seeds, the more seeds it's got. So yeah, I probably put this at maybe a 4. That would probably be a good number for it because there's not a lot of seeds in them. And so how do I rate this tomato overall? How is the whole rating on this tomato? Not just the flavor, but everything, how it grows, the interest in it, the novelty of it. I'm going to actually rate this very high for Nano Dwarf tomatoes. Not out of flavor or everything else, but because this tomato is so unique and so different from everything else, that it needs to have its own number above and beyond everything else. This is the absolute smallest tomato variety I personally ever grew. Now, they say that Micro Tom is even smaller, or it's world's smallest variety. I would put that up against this, and I do have the original Micro Toms coming, and we're going to grow them side by side, and we're going to see which ones are smaller. In my opinion, this this variety is far smaller. It's going to be a smaller variety. But because of the uniqueness of it, yeah, some of these other ratings were out as far as the flavor goes, but because of the uniqueness of the variety and its very limited classification, I'm probably going to rate this number up there around a 2, somewhere around there, because it's just unique to itself. I don't have really anything to compare it to. Comparing that to other Micro Dwarf varieties would be a complete, it would just be a shamble. I don't think that would be right to even do that, because they're just totally different varieties altogether. They're not the same thing as this. This is like in a world of its own. So, as far as any of the other stuff goes, like normally I want to write down over here what kind of season it was. So, was this early, mid-season? It pretty much ripened up with all the other Micro Dwarfs, and I consider Micro Dwarfs to be early to mid-season. And what I mean by season is if from the normal time you get out and you start transplanting, and you start your seeds, from that point on to the point where you harvest, I consider that to be your season, what type of season of plant it is. And so normally in my area we get out as far as early as April, but not very often. I'd say May would be our time, so May, June, July. So you're looking at 3 months. It's roughly 90 days. That's roughly to me that's a early to mid season. It can come earlier, I guess, depending on the temperatures and everything. But for me, it's a mid season plant. But they can come earlier than that. So that's what I would consider an early to mid season variety. And this, I think over here I was also including the plant, how the plants did and in general. I forgot what I wanted to include. I wanted to include something else. I don't remember what it was. But yeah, it's a unique variety, guys. This is definitely something, if you're a collector, you would definitely want to have this variety in your collection. Again, I refer to them as Nano Dwarf simply for my visitors that come to hrseeds.com. I want them to know that there's something different about this variety, and the only way to do it is to actually kind of change its nomenclature from Micro Dwarf to Nano Dwarf. But that's just for my site, and it really doesn't apply to everybody else. It just applies for my site, and my visitors who come there, they will know, hey, this is a Nano Dwarf variety, and he's got, 4 of those Nano Dwarfs? So let's go look at all the rest of them. That means that they're all tiny little plants, world's smallest varieties. I almost want to call them that. Yeah, I don't know what else. It's like I said, it's in a world of its own. So anyway, guys, that's your tomato review for the baby Micro Dwarf tomato. What I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description. It'll bring you over to the website. You can purchase the seeds there. And you can also go to the website and read about it there. Anytime I do any changes, I do it all on the website. I don't normally do it to the video. So that's about it, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.